In 1790, a German physiologist by the name of Ludemar Hermann discovered what has come to be known as the Hermann grid illusion. This is a Hermann grid. It is comprised of a white grid on a black background. If you keep your eyes staring at the intersection of the two lines in the middle of this image, you probably will eventually notice that each of the line intersections further away, closer to the periphery of your vision, start to appear as though they have a gray spot on them. Give it maybe 30 to 60 seconds and see if you experience it. This is an illusion, of course, because there aren't any gray spots at those intersections. Every intersection is actually just the intersection of two white lines. In 1994, German vision scientist Eberhard Lingelbach discovered what has come to be known as the scintillating grid illusion. The scintillating grid differs from the Hermann grid in two main ways. First, at each intersection, a white circle is drawn. Second, the grid itself is not white, but gray. Whereas the Hermann grid illusion seems to create gray spots at every intersection, a scintillating grid creates an illusion in which white dots seem to be twinkling black and white, especially in the periphery of your vision, where you're not quite focusing your attention. Have a look at a white circle near the middle of the scintillating grid image, and, keeping focus on that white circle, wait to see whether other circles further out in the periphery of your vision seem to twinkle black and white. This is an illusion, of course, because none of the white circles is actually twinkling black. The scintillation is an effect on your visual system created by what is in fact a static image. In a 1997 report by Lingelbach and his colleagues, Michael Schrauf and Eugene Wist, the researchers reported that they had experimented with various qualities of scintillating grid images. Through experimentation on human subjects, they concluded that the scintillation effect does not appear until the width of the circles is larger than the width of the lines. The effect is strongest, they found, when the ratio of the width of the line to the width of the circles is 1 to 1.4, and the effect diminishes as the relative size of the circles is increased beyond that. Although Lingelbach and his team did not mention it in their report, consider that the ratio of 1 to 1.4 is just 0.01 less than is required for the periphery of each circle to exactly touch the outer edges of the intersections of each line. Consider that if the width of the crossing lines is 1 inch, then the size of the square intersection of the lines is 1 inch by 1 inch. The distance between the opposite corners of that square is equal to the hypotenuse of the triangle formed with two adjacent sides. Hypotenuse equals square root of 1 inch squared plus 1 inch squared equals square root of 2 inches equals 1.4142. Given that the strongest scintillation effect was realized at what Lingelbach and his colleagues described as approximately 1.4 to 1, it would appear that the scintillation is maximized when the periphery of the circle intersects with the corners of the square formed by the intersection of the vertical and horizontal lines. Knowing the 1 to 1.4 ratio, I started looking for painters' line tapes and painters' circle tapes that would get me as close as possible to a circle that perfectly, or at least minimally, covered the intersection of the two lines at each intersection. I found the almost perfect solution in a tape that was 1/4 inch wide and then circles that were 3/8 of an inch in diameter. Lingelbach and his team discovered that the greatest or strongest scintillation effect occurred when the background was as dark as possible. They also found that the scintillation effect got stronger as the brightness of the lines increased relative to the background. I took it upon myself to do a bit of experimentation, so I made the background as black as I could, and I made the white dots as bright as I could. For me, the strongest scintillation effect happened when the background was as dark as it could get and the circles were as bright as they could get. Also, as the luminance or the brightness of the lines increased relative to the background, the scintillation effect seemed to get stronger, provided that the line didn't get so bright as to equal the brightness of the circles. Next, I wondered if the color of the lines mattered, or if all that mattered was the brightness or the lightness of the lines. Of course, I didn't test any subjects. I tested myself. But I proceeded by considering how color is coded in a computer. On a computer screen, each color is actually a mix of 3 colors, red, blue, and green. To create a black pixel, the red, the blue, and the green components are all turned to 0. To make a white pixel, you turn up the red, the green, and the blue pixels all the way, and they appear to create a white pixel. And for example, to create a red pixel, you would maximize the red brightness, but turn off the blue and the green brightnesses. Now, since white is made up of full red, full blue, and full green, obviously, if you turn off blue and green, leaving just red, the red isn't going to be quite as bright as the white, having been made up of only 1/3 of all of the sources that normally make up the white. Still pretty bright though. I then experimented with a black background, white circles, and changing up the colors of the lines, especially red, green, blue, and yellow. As long as I made the color as bright as I could make it, it wouldn't actually match the brightness of the white dot, we don't want it to, but as bright as I could make it, that scintillating grid effect was maintained. It didn't matter what color the lines were, I still got the scintillating grid effect. So I settled on using a black background with white dots and red lines, which gave me the added bonus of being the colors used to make up Eddie's Frankenstrat guitar. Red, black, and white. Finally, I had to decide how many intersections I wanted to appear on the guitar, each with its own dot. So I mocked up a grid and I superimposed it on an image of a Stratocaster at various sizes. Ultimately, I decided that the black squares should be 1 inch by 1 inch. That would leave me with a grid pattern that was approximately 9 by 14 on the front of the guitar or on the back of the guitar. I next had to think about the process for painting a grid pattern on a guitar. First, I would have to paint the entire guitar white. Then I would have to put the painter's tape dots on the guitar in the correct pattern at the correct locations. Next, I would have to paint the entire guitar red. Then I would have to apply the lines of tape, creating the intersections. Then I would have to paint the entire guitar black. By removing the line tapes, I would leave behind the red paint that had been the second color, and by then taking off the circles, I would be left with the white, the first color of paint that was put on the guitar. In the next several episodes of this series, I'm going to show you that process before getting into things like the electronics and the neck and the hardware. So let's go.